It's nearly time for the holidays. It's nearly time for, dare I be, denominational specific, Christmas and New Year, which means it's nearly time for you to put your feet up and relax and perhaps read a good book or two, or listen to a good book or two if you prefer to consume audiobooks than the paper kind. So on today's episode, we're going to give you 10 books for the break. If that sounds like something that you could use, maybe even just one of them, stick around. Hello, welcome to episode 118 of CRE Success, the podcast. My name is Darren Krakowiak, and I help commercial real estate leaders to develop their people and grow their business. Really appreciate you being with us today. And if you are jumping on a plane this holiday season, do yourself a favor and download some episodes from our past catalog. They're all there for you, available to listen to for free. But once you get on the plane, you might not be able to download them if you don't have Wi-Fi on the plane. So download those past episodes and then go through our back library while you're on the plane or while you're on the ground. There's a whole library of episodes for you to listen to, CRE Success, the podcast, including episode 67, where you will find 6 books for your success. They are 6 of the 10 that I want to tell you about today. You can also watch that past episode and see all the 10 books that we're talking about on a landing page we've set up for you at cresuccess.co/books. So go and check out that page. It's got the 6 books that we recommended in episode 67, the 3 books that we'll talk about today, plus one more book, which is the book from me, which is the 5 P's of Commercial Real Estate Success, our free ebook, which is available to download at cresuccess.co/books. So let's talk about the 3 books that I haven't talked to you about yet. The first one is called The Go-Giver. Now, this is a story about a powerful business idea by Bob Burg, and the premise of the book is that most people don't really understand that the secret to success is giving. And I didn't really understand this secret, and I've talked about how being more generous has opened up opportunities for me in this podcast. And, I used to look at people, whether it was with suspicion or thinking that they were going to be taken advantage of if they give without expecting anything in return, or if they just look to always add value to other people and to be generous. And that's one of the reasons why I think this book spoke to me, because it tells the story of this guy named Joe who really, wants to be successful. He's a go-getter, not a go-giver yet, in the true sense of the word. And he's really trying hard to get what he wants. But the harder he tries and the more that he works for it, the further away his goals get, because he's just going about things in the wrong way. Now, the story sort of starts towards the end of a sales quarter. So it's a story, right? But it's a story with some key messages. In fact, there are 5 laws of stratospheric success that Joe learns in the course of this book, because in the book he gets referred to a guy named Pindar, and he thinks that Pindar is going to help him close this big sale that's going to get him to reach his quota by the end of the month, or by the end of the quarter. But what actually happens is that Pindar says, I'm going to have a meeting with you, 5 lunches over the next week, and that's the way that I'm going to help you. And a little bit skeptical. Joe is still kind of, I guess, very curious about what this is going to mean and what it's going to lead to. So he goes ahead and has these 5 lunches with someone who runs a restaurant, someone who runs their own company, someone who's a financial advisor, someone who is a real estate broker. Yeah, so something for us to relate to there. And finally, a person who kind of brought everyone together. And those 5 people teach Joe those 5 laws of stratospheric success, and they open him up to the power of giving. Now, I think that this book is really, really amazing. You can read it, I reckon, in 2 sittings, probably 2-3 hours, and you'll read the whole book. It's not very difficult to read. And in fact, I think it's a book which I'm surprised hasn't been turned into a movie, because it's a great story and it could easily be turned into a movie. So I'm not quite sure why that hasn't happened yet. But even though it's not a particularly old book, it's probably about 10 years old, I think. It's sort of like it reads like a classic, right? And it's a bestseller, and it really drives home the point, which you've probably heard before, but perhaps you didn't take too much notice of, which is give and you shall receive. So if you could be a little bit more generous in your life, or if you're wondering why is it that some of the people who are very successful also seem so generous, and what's the correlation, if that's something you've noticed, this is a book that you should read. It's The Go-Giver by Bob Burg. All right, let's get into our next book recommendation now. And it's a book by a guy named Darren, but it's Darren Hardy. And the name of the book is The Compound Effect. And if that rings a tiny little bell, it might be because on the podcast, the Real Estate Academy podcast with Raphael and Jeff, which I've shared with you in this podcast feed when I was a guest on their show, Raphael recommended that book to me. And after he recommended it, I did read it. And in fact, I listened to this book on my audiobook Audible account. And then it was so good that I actually went out and got a physical copy. So there's a little side tip for you. If you do listen to a book and you realize that, hey, this is something that I want to retain, go and get a physical copy of the book. And I think just having that physical book on my bookshelf can help me remember the importance of what I read in the book. And you may also remember having been told this at some stage in your life, that there is nothing more powerful than the concept of compound interest. And that is really the core message of this book, but it's talking about the compounding effect that comes from just, your little bits of action. So it's not about a get rich quick scheme. It's not about hyperbole or magic bullets. It's really about the principles that, little things that you do every day will move you ever so much closer to the life you desire. Or on the other hand, it could get you further away from what you want. And it's just fundamental principles that have guided success in businesses, for people, in relationships, for people's success. And it's very easy to read. It's very kind of practical. It's a lot of things that you can look to adopt in your life to multiply your success and achieve what it is that you want to achieve. So I like this book because it does contain a lot of those concepts which I've read in other books, all brought together in one book in a very easy to digest format and writing style. There's a little bit of a story that runs through it as well. So that's The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. And then the third book that I want to talk to you about today is a book by Ari Meisel, and it's called The Art of Less Doing. And it's One Entrepreneur's Formula for a Beautiful Life. Now, the first book that I mentioned today, The Go-Giver, was one that I've also mentioned before on the podcast because Sam Wilson, when I was a guest on his podcast, actually mentioned that Bob Burg was a guest on his show. And I discovered Bob Burg's book, The Go-Giver, through a podcast that I used to listen to and still do sometimes, Graham Cochrane's podcast, where he sort of talks about ways that entrepreneurs can improve their ability to sell digital products. Probably not of interest to you, that one, but that's how I found the book. This third book, The Art of Less Doing, is actually one I found literally in my audio books recommended list, right? When you see that you might like this because you read that. So I decided to have a look at this one, and it was really, really good. And it starts off with the story of Ari, where he was basically killing himself from overwork and not treating his body right, and basically not thinking he's bulletproof. And I think that is something that a lot of people, particularly in commercial real estate and some people sort of maybe under 35, kind of do those things as well, in terms of the not only live hard and play hard, but just not really taking good care of themselves in terms of understanding that you need to look for ways to not just be reliant on the amount of input that you can put into something. You need to find more efficient ways to get things done, something that requires less of you. Otherwise, being successful in this industry, if the only way you have to do it is to put more in, will just take more from you. So it talks about how he basically got ill and how he, through improving his own physical health, started to realize that there were parallels that he could adopt to create more efficiency in his life and redesign his life from scratch. So he found the way to reduce his workload by roughly 80% while increasing his results and success. And that definitely is just productivity, right? Less input, more output is the bedrock of productivity. And I think, again, that's something that many people in commercial real estate haven't quite gotten their heads around, because a lot of the most successful people in our industry are still doing things the way that they did them 20 years ago, and they are the ones that a lot of people look up to. So this book, I think, can just open your mind up to concepts, ideas, ways that you can become more efficient and more productive in what you do. It's written from the perspective of an entrepreneur, but if you are a revenue generating commercial real estate professional, whether you are running your own business or if you are someone with an individual revenue target, then you are kind of like an entrepreneur. At least that's one way that you can look at yourself. And the concepts in this book will help you run a better business as an entrepreneur, as an individual producer, or if you are a business owner. So it's all about working smarter instead of harder. He's got a particular approach, which is optimize, automate, outsource, which, I've talked about slightly different variations on that, but he offers a good perspective on it, which I recommend checking out. The 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. It's all about how you can build a high-powered success story that is not required, that doesn't require more of you. So it's less work, more results, more happiness, I think is a good way to sum it up. So they're the three books that I'd like to recommend for you today: The Go-Giver by Bob Burg, The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy, and The Art of Less Doing by Ari Meisel. Now, the other 7 books that I said, well, to make up the 10, you can find in episode 67 or by going to cresuccess.co/books, where we've put links that can get you access to all of those 9 books written by other authors. And then the 10th book, you don't have to buy because it's available for free. It's the 5 Ps of Commercial Real Estate Success, written by yours truly. Now, we are going to have more content for you over the holidays, so make sure you do continue to come back here. Subscribe to the episode if you haven't already, and they will be waiting for you in your favorite podcast player. For now, I want to say thank you so much for listening, and I will speak to you soon.